All right, welcome back everyone. So in this video, what I want to do is talk about lighting in Blender. Um, we've got some pretty good lighting just coming from our dynamic sky, which we set up a couple of videos ago. But I want to talk about kind of customizing the background a little bit more. Also, I want to talk about lighting the interior of the space. And yeah, that's basically it. So everything we've got is pretty well dialed in now as far as all of our meshes and everything being in the scene. And we're ready to kind of put the finishing touches on this thing. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and go to my world tab here, and I'm going to delete the dynamic sky. Okay. So I'm in ray traced view here so you can see, but if you've got it in regular rendered view, you won't be able to see the environment and it'll look like this. That's fine for most purposes, but we'll be switching some stuff. I'll leave it in ray traced so you can see. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on new here. And then under color here, I'm going to put in an environment color, environment. So where am I getting that from? In some of my other tutorials, I've shown this before, but Adobe Stock, if you have an Adobe subscription, will have HDRI skies. If you just search for it. And sometimes you can find them around on the internet as well. You can select one you want. We've got stars, nebulas, all kinds of like desert scenes and stuff that you can use. I've already downloaded the one I'm going to use, and let's go ahead and put it into the scene here. So minimize this, and mine's just kind of basic. There's nothing super spectacular about it, but I want to make sure that I've got enough light in here. So I'll click on the color here, and then we're going to go to environment texture. And it turns the environment pink. Remember, this kind of magenta pinkish kind of color is a sign that there's a missing material. So we'll go ahead and open. I'll go to my downloads where I've downloaded my Adobe Stock image, and I add it to the scene. We go ahead and give it a second. Great. So if I zoom out, you can see the clouds and stuff. So the clouds are a little bit more dense, and I like that better for my scene. But I need more light. So this is where we get into actual lights. So I'm going to go Shift A, and that actually brings up my add section here. And I can add a light, and I'm going to add a sunlight. Go ahead and click on that. And it added it to the scene. If I push the decimal point, you can see where it is. If I go G to grab it and Z to lift it up, see there it is. I'm going to go to a top view, kind of place it in the center of my scene. So I just clicked up here, G, and then move it like, maybe right there. And then rotate around. And then G, Z, lift it up. And I can hit R and rotate it, and you see how it kind of changes the direction of the shadows. So you can kind of pick where you want the shadows to line up. G, and then hold down X so it locks it into the X direction, or sorry, Y, so it locks into the Y direction. And then I'm going to kind of try to get it to kind of light up the front of my building there. So I want the sun kind of coming in this way. And then if I click with this selected, if I click on this little light bulb here, you can see I can now put that up, maybe double it. So I've got more light, maybe even 3. Okay. And you can see how all the shadows are matching up here. So this is customizing the lighting even more. Great. Let me frame my camera bounds here. Cameras, frame camera bounds. And then zoom in here. Okay, so that is setting up the sunlight and bringing in your own custom HDRI into the scene. Now let's talk about the interior a little bit more. I'm going to bump out of my camera here and rotate into my space here. Now my space is very dark. And the reason for that is I don't have any lights in here. And I like how the contrast is outside, and I don't want to bump up the sunlight. Well, let's try bumping up the sunlight just ever so slightly more. Maybe we'll go over here to bounces and do 2048, and then bump up the intensity to 5. Still not filling in my space inside here. So what I want to do next is I want to add some lights inside of here. So I'll go Shift A, and the kind of light I like to use is a rectangular light. It's the easiest. You can play around with some of the other lights. Like spotlights are cool for like sculptures. You can set like a hot spot, fall off, and that kind of stuff. But because we're gonna have to redo most of the lighting in the Unreal Engine anyway, I like to just get enough light into the scene to do what I want. So I'm gonna go in area light. And then I want to go to a top view here, and then I'm going to switch to wireframe, and then I'm going to hit G to grab it and move it over to here. Okay. And then with it selected, I'm going to still rotate down into here so I can kind of see where it is. Maybe I'll go to a side view and G, Z to kind of lift it up. And then go back to a top view here. And then I can see the size of it. So I'm holding down Shift and I'm center mouse wheel clicking to kind of move around without flipping the space. I can scale it by going S for scale, like that. Okay. And so that increases the scale. And then I'm going to switch back to this view here, just a rendered view, and rotate in, and then push my decimal point to zoom on my selected object here. And then I'm going to switch to ray trace so I can see how bright it is. Not very bright. It's only 10 watts, right? So if you had a 10-watt bulb inside of a warehouse, it's not going to light up much, right? So with it selected still, I've got my little light tab here, and I can take my 10 watts and I can make it 2000. Okay? And so that 2000 watts is enough to do what I want it to do. Okay? So right now I've got one of them in the scene. I can add more as well and kind of control how the scene is lit. Let me go to my I'm going to click and zoom out a little bit so I can zoom out slowly. This object here, decimal point. Or remember, I'm pushing the decimal point on my numpad. I keep saying this over and over again, but frame selected is under view here as well. So if you select an object, you can frame select it. And then I'm going to just control my zoom by clicking and dragging out here. And you can see that this object is not lit as much as I'd like it to be. So I can always click on this and then go Control, or is it Shift D? I think it's Shift D. Shift D duplicates it, and then I can hit Y, and move it back until I get it lighting up my scene more the way I want. Click to end it. Cool. So now I've got a good amount of light there. And the last thing I want to do is actually add a bit of this light to the downstairs gallery space. So I click on it again and Shift D to duplicate and just kind of move it into that space there. Switch to a right view, back to wireframe, and then G to move it right there. Switch to a top view just to make sure that it is centered in our space. And I'm going to scale it in because I do not need it bigger than my room. And then I'm going to scale it S with an X up with a Y to make it a little bit longer. SY. All right. switch back to ray traced here and have a look at it. All right, so now we've got our scene pretty well lit from the inside, and I can keep tweaking on more of this stuff if I wanted to. Like maybe I want to even add like some sort of a rectangular light across the top here or underneath, or just moving things around, adding more light to the scene as necessary. But those are the basics. So I've got a pretty well lit scene now. I have a camera set up, of course, at the front here. Whoops, which I just messed up, right? Oh, yes, my camera is locked in right here, so. Yeah, I think it's looking pretty good. So also, I mentioned spotlights. Let me go ahead and show how to control those. If I go Shift-A, I can add a light spotlight. Okay. Now I'm going to go to a top view again and switch back to wireframe, and then hit my decimal point or go to view, frame selected. And it's always starting at the origin point way over here. So I'm going to go G to grab it, and I'm just going to move it kind of into the general direction of one of my sculptures. Hit the decimal point to zoom in on it. Like, where is this light? Okay. I'm going to G, Z to move it up. And you can see the different parameters of the spotlight attached to it. So we have fall off, like how, so this is like the hard area of the light. So if I click on it and hit scale, it'll scale it in. And then if I click on the light itself, I get all these parameters over here. Like, okay, so what is the power of it? What is the radius of it? So if I increase the radius, it has like, that changes the size of the bulb. The spot size is how the angle of the light is. And the blend is going to be the softness versus the hardness of the light. So if you wanted to have like a pinpoint spotlight like that, and then the fall off is nice and soft, looks like that. Let's switch over to ray traced. And again, this is only a 10 watt light right now, so it might not make a major difference. Let me zoom in, decimal point over it. Bump that up to 500, and now you can see the white of the light coming off of the light above, hitting the object. Great. So that's how a spotlight works. If you wanted to spotlight some things, know the more lights in your scene, the harder it's going to be on your processor and stuff. So that's another reason why I like to use a lot of rectangular lights versus spotlights. Spotlights have more parameters to them, so that also makes them a little bit more taxing on your computer. But if you get a lot of spotlights in your scene, you can then take your rectangular lights and lower the value range on that and rely more on the spotlights. You can really dial in like the subtleties of how your space looks with the right lighting environment. So, okay, so that's going to do it for the lighting. Let's go ahead and do some rendering here. So I've already got a camera set up right in front of this sculpture here. So I'm just going to bring it back, and then I'm going to jump into the camera scene. So I'm going to toggle over here just by hitting this. Cool. And so I've got, when I click on this exterior border here, I've got this little camera button here. And And what I want to do is I want to change a couple of parameters. So when I'm focusing in on just one object and I don't want the entire thing to be in focus, I want to use some bokeh and change my f-stops. I'm going to come down here where it says depth of field, and I'm going to click it and toggle this on. And then I'm going to choose my distance. So I'm pretty close to this. I'm going to use an f-stop of 3, and you can see I've already got it set to be in focus with my object here. So if it's way out of focus, you just want to think, how close is the camera to the object you want to have in focus? So I'm going to back this back down to like 0.5 millimeters, because I'm like 1.5 feet away from the object here. Yeah, maybe 0.5 there. Cool. And that looks pretty sharp. Great. And so, yeah, you can go ahead and go over to the render tab here. Make sure you're on cycles. If you've got a graphics processor that's capable of processing your scene, GPU compute here. And then I'm going to use 2,500 samples here. For that, and then I'm going to switch over to this, and the resolution I'm going to set here is 2500 by 1500 pixels, and I'm going to go ahead and render this scene out by hitting F12. Okay, so this is what the rendering looks like, and you can see I've got my object in focus, and then I've got the background blurred out. So that's one way of doing it. And of course, if you're doing like a full room render that you want to get all of the information and detail in, you're not going to use the f-stop. But in this specific scene here, I wanted to have that one object in focus. So let's talk a little bit more about a couple of other parameters. All right, it's looking pretty good. We've talked about spotlights. We've talked about rectangular lights, the sun. We've also added in our own custom HDRI. Now I want to talk about like having particles in the atmosphere, like a little atmospheric fog or something like that. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift A, and I'm going to add a mesh cube. Okay. It's right there. I'm going to scale it up. S to scale. S to scale. Oh, how big are we scaling? Right about there. So then I'm going to go switch to a top view and go G, grab it, kind of move it. S, scale it up a little bit more so it takes over the whole scene, basically. And then I'll go to a front view just to make sure it's all lined up. All views that way. Okay. With this selected, we'll switch over to Shading tab. Shading tab, I'm going to go New Material, and then I'm going to delete this part. And then I'm going to pull out Volume, and I'm going to go Volume Scatter right there. And I'm going to set the, whatever this A word is, 0.9. Okay. And then I'm going to set the color here, or this one here, 0.001, enter. And you can see it just adds like a little bit of a foggy kind of look to things. And you can kind of play with your numbers might be a little bit different than mine. That's fine too. Click on something here and decimal point, lock it in. So that gives like some strength to the atmosphere, right? And then one last thing, if you are still feeling like your lighting is not quite exactly the way you want it to be, you can go up to the render output here, render settings, render properties, and then look for film. Film here, your exposure is right here. I can go up to 2, and that, doubles my exposure. Great. So everything else I think is looking really good. Lighting is locked in. Okay, and you need to do a couple renderings of this. So let's talk renderings. I have gotten rid of my camera. I just deleted it. So if I want to add a new one, Shift A, and I'm going to do camera. Whoop, not a speaker. I want camera. Control Z, get rid of the speaker. Shift A to add camera. Okay. The camera is now over here. Okay. If I toggle into it. Now remember, I have set this before, but I'll set it again. Go to view here and make sure you have camera to view so that as we move around the space, the camera is moving with us. Okay. And then I'm going to click on this and I'm going to frame selected. And I'm going to switch over to layout. Put it in regular rendered. and rotate around. Lock in my camera view here. Okay. Cool. So then I'm going to click on the boundary around the camera, and that's going to lock me in here, or I can click on this. And right now I've got a 50 millimeter lens. I'm going to go wider with it. I might go 23 millimeters. Good. And then decimal point lock in here. So I'll do one rendering of the front of the building, and then I'm going to do another rendering of the interior. I think it looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and render this out by hitting F12. And this is going to take a minute. Okay, so this is how it looks. You can see the quality of the light is awesome with that atmospheric fog. Note that it does take longer to render with that. So if you're having rendering issues, you might want to just abandon the atmospherics. But yeah, so I'm going to do a couple more renderings of the interior, and I will post those as well at the end of this video. But I hope you found this informative. It's just a lot about lighting in Blender and how to get that really nice photorealism happening within the scene. Once we're done rendering it, you just go up to image here and save as, and then save it as a PNG. Title it whatever you will. I'm going to call this one exterior render. And there we go. Save as image, and you're done. I'm going to do a couple more of these, and I will post them at the end of the video.